She was there the day I showed up in 1970, and we became friends over the years. And when Don Randall's last years, we were going to lunch with him every Friday, and he'd enjoy those times, of course. And she was always there. She did everything for the guy, everything she could, as far as being his secretary will say. Now, she did a lot of other things and answered his phone and da-da-da.
Right.
Well, you were there, so, you know, you saw his office. You went to his office every day, except for on Wednesdays, he'd duck out about 11:30 and go play golf, which was right down the street from our Irvine factory.
Oh, okay.
He was a member of Santa Ana Country Club. And he joined, when he came out of the service in 1945, we'll say, he was a radio man in the service. He joined the country club, the Santa Ana Country Club, for $300. Well, now it's probably $100,000 or something, you know. So but he got in for $300.
That's awesome.
And he played with his buddies down there. And he got a new Cadillac every 3 years until about 1980-ish. Yeah, about 1980. He shows up one day in this bright red Jaguar, the two-door. And I had a '68 Corvette at the time, and they kind of had the same back end. They kind of looked the same. He says, "You want to race, Gary?" I says, "No, I don't think we shouldn't be racing, Randall. You know, we're adults here." So yeah. So we never did really race, but he got a kick out of teasing me all the time. So he took that red Jaguar. It was like a '78 or something, I'll say. And he took that Jaguar over to a company in Costa Mesa, I think it was, called Interjag. And what they did, they took the Jaguar engine out and put a Corvette engine in it, V8. So he said, "You'll get a kick out of this." So we drove over there together and we dropped it off, and I took him back to the shop. And a couple of weeks later, they called him and says, "Your car's ready." So we went over there, and it had a Corvette engine in it, V8, and that was their specialty. So they had all the correct brackets and all the mounting and everything. It looked like the real deal. It wasn't hand-boned in there, you know. And he was up there paying him. He says, "Will I get a trade-in on my old engine?" And the guy, I looked, he says, "Well, just look out there, and there's a big mound of these engines out in the yard." He says, "Take your pick. You can have any you want." He goes, "Oh." So he drove the Jaguar for a long time, and I never could figure out why he changed from Cadillac to Jaguar. Well, some of his buddies at the golf course, they were switching over to Jaguar, and he knew Bauer Jag, and he knew those guys, and I guess they played golf together, whatever. So they kind of switched from the Cadillac to the Jaguar. Then he got 2 or 3 of those as the years went by, and he was the.
Just fix your collar real quick.
Okay.
There we go. You're fine.
So that was his new favorite car. But he was quite a guy. When he and Leo were together at Fender, he did all the promotion and sales and all that. And a lot of people didn't realize how much he really knew electronically. They always thought Leo designed the amps. Now, Leo did a lot of work on the guitars with the help of other people that knew about guitars, you know, the shapes and da-da-da. But Don Randall knew a lot about electronics, and that's what made my job designing the amplifiers better, because he knew what I was doing, and we could work together. And he knew about electronics. He knew a lot about it, because he had a ham radio license, and he studied it. And so when he and Leo were working together at Fender, Don Randall was more the social guy. He'd go out and meet and greet the dealers and go to all the shows and take them all to dinner and all that sort of stuff. And Leo never went to a NAMM show until he got to, I think it was Music Man or G&L. They finally talked him into going to one. And that's when I first met Leo. I think it was like 1975. And Leo was quite a character too, but he wasn't the social type of guy that, very bright and smart and nice, real nice guy, but except he just wasn't very outgoing and all that. So that's why they didn't really pal around together so much socially, because Leo was kind of an introvert that way, and Randall was very outgoing, liked to hang around with people and tell stories. Maybe that's part of my problem. But anyway, so Leo came to the first NAMM show that he ever went to in 1975, like I said, and he saw we had a power amp, about the size of that out, and it was our first rack mount power amp. And Leo came up and looked at that thing and looked at it and looked at it, and he says, "Well, that's really well built." And I thanked him because Leo was the guy that knew how to build things. I mean, physically, nuts and bolts kind of guy. If it took 2 bolts to hold it down, he'd use 4. And he really liked our amplifiers. As far as the way it was mechanically put together, he didn't care about the watts or the sound. It was a mechanical thing to him. But Randall knew all about the electronics of the thing, of all this stuff. And I'd run around, and 2 heads are always better than 1, especially if 2 of them are thinking electronics. And our salespeople our sales manager could never figure out what I do in that lab. I had about 1,000 square foot lab. It's just me and a draftsman. But then I got rid of the draftsman in about 1985 when I got a computer. And I got a computer so I could lay out the front panels on the amplifiers and do circuit board design. So the sales guy says, we used to ask Randall, "What's Gary doing down there?" "Well, he's designing stuff. You'll see it at the next show, the next NAMM show." "Oh, yeah, well, I don't know." They could never, he didn't understand, so. But Randall and I used to stay late after work till 7 o'clock in the evening some nights, working on new designs. And he really liked that part of it. And he liked running a business too, because he's good at it.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can start, back up just a little bit and get some background on yourself and how you got to Randall, if you don't mind. Where did you grow up?
Basically, San Gabriel. I went to Pasadena City College. I built my first tube radio, as it turned. They didn't have transistors back then. When I was 4th grade, you're 10 years old when you're 4th grade. My dad worked at Beckman Instruments, and he got me a hunk of metal with a hole in it, and I put the tube and did all that and wired it up, and it worked. Luckily, there was a radio station about 500 yards from our house, so anything would work, So that was in the 4th grade. Then I went to high school and took all electronics I could there. Got my ham license, my general class ham license, which is still active today, when I was 15. Built my first tube guitar amplifier when I was about 19 or 20. I joined a band called the Escorts, and we started playing local things and stuff, and we made one record called Wiped Out. And it was produced by a guy, I think, that took that song. It was his song to begin with, the producer's song, and he wanted somebody to play it, and our band played it. I think he finally took it to the Safaris, and they did Wipe Out, because listening to the two is very similar. But anyway, so I built my first tube amp, and it was homemade, in a homemade box and everything, and it played okay. I was using a Gibson EBO, or EB1, the one that was shaped like a violin. Real old. Well, it wasn't old then, but it's old now. And I'd play it, and the guys in the band said, "Gary, everything sounds okay, but get a Fender bass, and why don't you buy a Fender bass amplifier?" So we all looked the same. Back then they were the white Tolex, the cream Tolex. I said, "Well, yeah, got this." I cut the record on that one. And he says, "Well, okay." So I went and got one. So we all looked the same, got a Fender bass and all that. And then that band, some of them went off to Armed Services. And I went to Pasadena City College, took electronics there. And, well, after I graduated from high school, I went to JPL, which is in Pasadena, and applied for a job, and I got a job as a high school, what they call, summer help. So I was the youngest guy at JPL. I had to be because my birthday was July 21st, and I took the test, and he said, "Oh yeah, you did great on the test, but how old are you?" I said, "Well, 17." He says, "Well, we don't hire anybody unless they're at least 18 or older." I said, "Okay." He said, "Oh, your birthday, yeah, come in the day after your birthday, and you're on." So I went up there the day after my birthday, and they put me in the missile building where we're working on corporals and sergeant missiles, 200-mile range things that von Braun, they're kind of copies of V2s. We had von Braun at the lab at the time. We got him from Germany after the war. And so I worked there. So they called me the teenage rocket scientist because I was in the missile building, and I was a teenager. So then I built my first solid state guitar amplifier while I was there. Scared up some schematics, drew up something, and built this ham bone thing and got it to working. And then I left the I went to Cal Poly after Pasadena City College in Pomona. And then I got married in 1964, and I started a business building slot car power supplies for commercial raceways. The big tracks, one would fit in this room, and that would be one track. The really big tracks these guys were building, called American Raceways in Beverly Hills. How they found me is another long story, but they found me, and I built power supplies for them, and I was the world's largest commercial power supply maker, only because they were the world's largest track maker. So they had me making power supplies. And we built about 100 a month of those. And that got me going. My general manager in that business says, "Well, you play guitar and you're a horse around, you build guitar amplifiers. Why don't we get in the guitar amplifier business?" And I said, "You mean like a Sunda amp or something?" He says, "Well, yeah, you can call it whatever you want, but look at Fender, they're really going nuts." I said, "Yeah, they are. They're back ordered 6 months. This is in 65-ish now. And they're back ordered, so far." But I said, "Who would want a Sunda amp when you can buy a Fender? That's really a great amp." He says, "Well, you never know." So I built one. We built 2, 4, 8, 10. We built about 1,000 of them. And during that year or two, I met Pat Quilder. You know who Pat Quilder is. Just talked to him the other day. Great guy. And Pat and I always go back and reminisce on all that old stuff. Anyway, so I started building guitar amplifiers, and a local guy in the Orange County area was playing one bass amplifier. He's in a nightclub, and Don Randall went into this nightclub, as a story is told to me later, and he saw this guy named Joe was playing one of our amplifiers, and so he went up. I guess he knew Joe a little bit or something. He went up to the guy and said, "Who's this guy Sunda?" He said, "Oh, he's over there, and he builds these amplifiers." "Oh, I'll check him out," Don Randall says. So I closed that business because dealers don't want to pay. You know how dealers are. You deal with them all the time. And so I ran out of money and closed that one. So Don Randall gives me a call like in 1968. I have a shop that repairs amplifiers. And so he calls me up, and I didn't know. I'd never met Don Randall yet. So I answer the phone. I says, "Sunda Service." And he says, "Hi, this is Don Randall." And I fell over my chair, went, pow. I said, "Don Randall?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "I'd like to talk to you." I said, "Well, yeah, that's good. That's good stuff." So he picked me up in a day or two, and we went to the Elks Club in Santa Ana, which he was a member of at the time, and had lunch, and we talked about tubes, and we talked about transistor, we talked about him getting back in the business. He says, "I'd like to get back in the amplifier business, it's what I know." And he had a deal with CBS Fender when they sold it in '65, not to go into competition with them for like 10 years, 5 years, 10 years, somewhere. I know that's a big difference, but something like that. So he decided that he really wanted to get back in the amplifier business, where Leo Fender did it a little differently. They both split $13 million. And Leo wanted to get back into business. So Leo had all his money in a bank, we'll say. He was building buildings too up in Fullerton area. And Randall had buildings in Santa Ana area, and they both had a lot of money. So what Leo did, he kind of financed this company called Electro Music, I'll call it that. It wasn't Music Man at the time. And one of my customers walked in the door of my shop one day with this amp that looked like a super reverb, and I looked at it and said, wow, that's a super reverb, but it's not. Had a couple tubes in it, and I said, what is this? Oh, it's a prototype. It's Leo's new deal. I said, well, how do you know that? Well, I'm out testing it for him, and I thought, oh, okay, whatever. So that was like 68, 69-ish, and the Music Man is just starting up. And then they came out with a line of amplifiers, Music Man did, with Music Man on it. And then when Don Randall called me, we went to lunch, and he'd like to get back in the amplifier business. So we talked about all the variations, kind of, and everything. And so I go home, and he drops me off. My wife says, well, how'd it go? I said, went great, great guy. I mean, gee, we talked, you know, about everything. And she says, did he hire you? I said, no, we just talked. Oh, well, do you want to work for him? He says, yeah, that'd be great. Well, I just started playing golf at that time, about almost 30 years old, started playing golf. And I thought, gee, if I go to work 9 to 5, that's going to cut into my golf, learning to play and all that. But if I got my own business like I had there, I had Orange County Speaker, just started that, which we still have today, and a Sunda service. But I could leave anytime, go play golf. So Randall calls me up like a few months later, and he's got this chassis, and he says he wants a master volume put in it, so overdrive, sustain, you know. I says, okay. So I went down to his office in Irvine, that's where the factory was. Went down there, picked up this chassis. He says, how much you going to charge to put that in? I said, $15. Oh, okay. So I took off and put it in there and took it back, and he had his sales guys come in. Now, is this what you want for master volume? The guys, yeah, that's it. Okay, so I got my $15, went home, and my wife says, did he hire you? I said, well, no, but we had a great time, you know. This went on for a couple more times, and my wife says, you know, just ask him for a job. If you don't want to work, fine. If you do want to work for him, that's fine. But just ask him, and if he doesn't, you know. So I did. I went back down and I says, yeah, I'd like to go to work for you. He says, oh, I thought you'd never ask. So anyway, we teamed up in 1970, and I dropped the service end of the business and kept the Orange County Speaker. My wife ran that, and the kids were just born then, my kids. And they grew up around the business. Now they run it. And so when I started with Randall, he says, there's your lab, and he had all the latest equipment in there for testing and designing and all this. And a couple weeks later, I get my business, he gives me business cards. My title is Vice President of Engineering. I go, hey, wait, Vice President of Engineering? That's pretty heavy. I guess that's probably right. I'm the only one here, you know, in this big old room. And I went down to his office and says, am I really Vice President of Engineering? He says, yeah, why not? He was a great guy. I said, well, okay, does that mean I have to go to board meetings and stuff? He said, nah, don't worry about that. So I started designing him stuff, and then the catalogs, every piece in there I designed for him, whether it was a speaker cabinet or an amplifier or a whatever it was, a PA system.
Is that where Randall started, the company name?
Yeah. This chassis he gave me was actually built by Bob Crooks at Standell. And he was having Bob build him a few chassis to start out with. Bob Crooks is a very nice guy. He's passed now, but real nice guy. And I guess they got along okay. As a matter of fact, Tommy Walker was involved with Randall before I got there. Well, Tommy's a nice guy, except they never got along very well. I mean, they got along, but if Randall said, I want to have a green knob, Tommy would say, I think it should be a red knob. That was always going on. But with me, we were pretty parallel in our thinking on amplifiers, Randall and I. You know, he'd make suggestions, and they're usually good because he's my boss, and and I'd make a suggestion, and he'd say, oh, Gary, you're full of crap. And, you know, that's the relationship we had, and a very good relationship. Anyway, so I guess Tommy was there for a few months, and finally he said, Tommy, we can't get along. We're not doing this. That was with the Randall Company in, like, 1970. So he brought me on, and that's when it started. And it was called Randall at the time. And we had a sales force of 5 to 8 guys around the country, repped Randall and other non-competitive items. Went to all the NAMM shows, 2 a year. That's when the NAMM show. You have a water? I could.
I'll go get you some.
Thanks.
The NAMM show, the what we call the Disneyland show, was at Disneyland Hotel,
Right.
and you could have put the whole thing in half of your building. And that was that way for a couple of years, and it started growing. And the NAMM show in Chicago was huge. This is my first my first year at Randall was the year that the McCormick place burnt down,
Oh, yeah.
and that was like 1970, I guess, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And we all ended up in Houston,
Oh, that's
Texas. And I didn't know. I'm brand new at this thing. I haven't been on the team but a couple of months. Oh, thanks. So, so we go to Houston, the first show with the Randall stuff, and I'll tell you the story. You don't have to put this on tape. You can, but don't publish it. I'd met Hartley Peavy about 2 years before that when I was working on amplifiers and servicing them. I had a contract, not a contract, but I was warranty service for Fender. They treated me really well because the dangest thing happened at Fender. They closed their service center to factory, and I'm just 5 miles from there, you know. So they called me up, says, would you like to repair Fenders under warranty? I said, sure. I'm doing it anyhow, I have to fix them anyway. And they said, okay, yeah, you're on, and we'll give you tubes. And that's when I was buying 6L6s for $2 a piece. Now they're $52. I don't know what they are now, but and transformers and stuff, the big ticket items. They'd give me 50 and 20 off of what retail would be. They gave me an extra 20 because if I worked it for a dealer, the dealer, I'd make the 20 on the dealer, and the dealer could market it from there. So I got dealer plus another 20. Anyway, so Wilson, I don't know if you knew about Wilson Brothers and Peavy. Well, they were out here hustling Peavy like a couple of wildcats. And because Peavy's price structure, it was going everywhere. This is in 60, 80s, 60, 70s, right around there. I think Peavy started in 65, basically. That's what he claims. That's fine. Anyway, so the Wilson guys, they were out selling it, and it was breaking, and then they knew about me, so they came to me and said, would you fix this? And I said, well, yeah. And pretty soon, they're backing up little trucks, and they're unloading trucks, you know, little Datsun trucks or whatever. I was just like, whoa, wait a minute, I can't do all this. He says, yeah, I don't know what to do. I called Hartley, and he says it shouldn't break, and all that. So anyway, they said, well, we'll get Hartley to fly out here, and you can talk to him, and you guys can fix it all together. I said, well, whatever. So Hartley flies out, and we meet in my little shop, and I got a saw because I was making cabinets, and we put a case of beer up on the saw. This is after hours. And he's pacing up and down the floor. Peavy, Hartley is. I don't understand it, Gary. This is the only place my amplifiers break is California. I said, yeah, okay, whatever. What do you find in there? Well, sometimes something's burnt out, sometimes the reverb pan gets loose and tear stuff up. It's a variety of everything. So he brings me out this stack of schematics, and he goes through them one by one. Oh, when you find one of these, change this to this. I said, well, I'm not really interested in redesigning your stuff. I'm just trying to get it working for Wilson and the guys. And, oh, okay. And we had a good visit. Hartley's a real character. Obviously, you've met him. And so, so then I joined Randall in '70, and I'm in the Houston show. Oh, Hartley, when he came in my shop and he saw all these PVs stacked up there, he says, tomorrow you bring in a bed sheet and cover that up because I don't want your customers seeing all this broken PV in here. I said, well, okay, whatever. I never did, but anyway. So he sees me at this show, and he knew I joined Randall at the time. And I'm walking by his booth, and he had not the big thing he's got now, he had a smaller booth, obviously, he's just starting. And he grabs me by the shirt sleeve, and says, Gary, come here. I said, yeah. He says, see that? He had an artist rendering about this big of this 100,000 square foot plant, in watercolor, really nice looking. He says, you see that? I said, yeah, that's really nice. He says, you guys better get your shit together. I said, why? What's happening? He says, when I open that plant up, there's going to be parts going this end, and amps and guitars are going to fly out the other end. And he meant it, and he did it, obviously. I said, well, yeah, whatever. He took everybody as a competitor, no matter if they built one a month or Fender, or Vox and all those guys, So anyway, he told me that, and we'd been friends for quite a while. I met his engineer, Jack Sondemeyer. Jack's a great guy. Jack was a real character. And I talked to Hartley just about 2 years ago, and Jack had a stroke. And he's not, I wanted to find out what Jack was doing, because he and I go way back, and we used to do a lot of drinking and stuff together at shows. See, it's all your fault, man. You get us together and we start drinking. So anyway, Jack was a great guy, and he wrote the book on solid state power amplifiers. Literally wrote the book when he was at RCA. RCA had this transistor manual about that thick, and he literally wrote the book. And that's Hartley decided he better get the best in there because he's had some problems technically. So he got Jack away from RCA. But Jack now, apparently he's in a wheelchair, and I asked Hartley, he says, yeah, he wouldn't even recognize you, Gary. He says, doesn't he recognize me? I said, that's a shame. Because he was one bright guy. I learned a lot from Jack. Well, getting to know the other engineers, my competition, like Bill Hughes and Roger Cox at Fender, and Mark Wentling, and Jack Sonnemeyer, and Bud Ross from Custom. Did you ever meet Bud Ross?
I sure have. Yeah.
Oh, neat guy.
Really good guy.
Really good guy. He and Randall got together. Bud admit this too. He's been broke. He's been rich and poor 10 times. So one day he calls up Randall on the phone. This is like in the '80s, I guess. And his custom thing has already gone and went, and the other thing he had, and a couple other things, foot pedals, whatever. Anyway, calls up Randall. I could hear him on the phone. It's like back out of the office. And Randall comes down and says, that was Bud Ross on the phone. I says, yeah, sound like you, Bud. He says, what'd you do? He says, oh, I bought some stock. I said, Bud hustle you on something? He says, well, yeah. He's in the TV dish business. And the big dishes, they're 10 feet, not the ones today, they're this big. He's in that, and I bought some penny stock, and I guess, anyway, Bud was quite a hustler. He was a great guy. And L.A. Krause was his engineer, and actually L.A. was with Peavy for a while, and he went back to Bud. But anyway, all these engineers and my competitors, we all got along really well. We used to like to get together because who else are we going to talk to, But that used to bother Hartley. I mean, see, a lot of Hartley's salespeople were ex-Fender people, like Robinson and those guys were ex-Fender salesmen. So they knew Don Randall. Don Randall knew Peavy's dad really well because Peavy's dad had the music store, and they were a Fender dealer, and Randall and Fender, So, and they always liked to hang around Randall because he's a really nice guy. So after the shows. After the show closed, oh, come on, we'll go up to Randall's room. And Hartley just used to fume. Don't hang out with the competitors. God dang it, you know. He went nuts. And then Jack and I got along really well. Jack liked rum and Coke and a glass about this big. Of course, I didn't do any of that, but Jack was a great guy, really bright. And so you get to know all the engineers and you hear what's going on. And one day Jack came in the booth. It was at the Anaheim show in our Randall booth, and we had these big white bags, big bold letters on it, Randall Amps or whatever it said. So Jack would come in there and he'd take my picture. He said, "Oh, stand by your amps, take a picture." Did that every year for years. I said, "What do you do with these pictures?" "Oh, they're on the dartboard." I am, you know. So he says, it was a Sunday afternoon. That's when all the guys like me and Jack go around spying on your competitors. So he came by the booth, say hi, and he did. And he says, "Can I have one of those, bags that put literature in it?" I'm going to go out and look at stuff. I said, "Sure, but if Hartley sees you with a Randall bag, he's going to shoot you." So off he goes. Jack takes off. A little while later, he comes back and the bag's full. He says, "Can I have another one?" I said, "Yeah, it's got 2 Randall bags." I said, "Oh boy," because Hartley took a lot of stuff personally, and a lot of things, and there's too many stories to do today. We'll have to do it another day. But the Randall Company, like I said, I started in '70, and I was out of there in 1990. They let me go. In 1987-ish, 86-ish, Don Randall's wife, Jean, got shingles. And it's the worst case of shingles that they'd ever seen. And he took her to all the specialists he could find, because he had enough money, he could do what he wanted, to take her anywhere. And all he could do, they never did cure. And you don't die from it. It's just very painful. If you know anybody's had shingles. My wife's had it once for a week, and nothing, no big deal, but she had it. And at least they got a chance to travel. They did a lot of traveling with their friends over in Europe. Randall got to play St. Andrews golf course over there. And when he came back, he and I used to work in my lab at Randall, work on golf clubs and sand down and paint them and everything. And anyway, that's what I told you about golf. I was a golf nut for a while. So he came back from St. Andrews playing that course. I said, "What do you think?" He said, "That's a goat path." He said, "I'll never go back there." I guess he didn't score too well. But it is it's pretty rough compared to the well-manicured courses that we have in the States. So he traveled quite a bit. And in 1988, he sold the company to a guy that had a distributorship of Casio keyboards in Canada. And that guy made a lot of money doing that. And he thought, well, Casio's going to cam me one of these days because they like to bring their own people in. So I better find something that I can go do. And so he approached Randall and Guild. And Randall sold the company to him in '88. And about that same time, this guy was able to buy Guild too. So when the new guy took over, the company was really peaking, and we had all these endorsees and really doing great. And he sort of wrecked it. Didn't sort of wreck it, he really wrecked it. And he wasted so much money doing different things that weren't in the Randall pattern, the Randall Company pattern, that it was unbelievable.
Like what sort of things? Like different products?
Products he'd come out with, and he'd want to change the color of knobs like that. I said, "Yeah, we got 100,000 of these knobs still in stock." And he says, "Well, that doesn't matter. They're only 30 cents a piece," or whatever they were. I said, "Yeah, but 100,000 is a lot of dough." Well, I want to change the knobs. And then we got a couple meetings. Well, one in particular, we we're talking about stuff like this. You're too traditional, Gary. I says, yeah, but these amplifiers, when I got here in 1970, were like this, and they've evolved to this. Evolved, actually. We did little things to them, and they evolved up to a really good amplifier in today's market. And he says, you're too traditional. What do you think you are, an expert? I says, well, yeah, I am, because I wouldn't be here if I wasn't. Oh, he got all huffy about that. But the guy socially was very good. And when he went out to dinner, everything's great. But business-wise, he didn't have a clue what was going on. And Don Randall, kept his office right down the hall from me. And if I would have bought that company, I'd be sitting in Randall's office every day learning what's going on. He never used Randall for a lick of it. And he never used me because, he didn't want to hear about ohms and watts. He should have learned about how the business is run. And he tried to get the cabinet part of the business back in Wisconsin. So he took our head cabinet guy and one of our head covering guys, I guess, and took them back there to teach those guys in Wisconsin how to make cabinets, set up a whole factory. So we built the chassis in Irvine's, put them on a pallet, sent them back there. More waste. So when Raphael came back from there, teaching them how to do all this, I said, how'd it go? Did you teach everybody how to do this? He says, no. I said, what'd you do? He says, he had me make a workbench. I said, great. So it's just things like that went on. And finally, when Randall sold the company to him, he said, take care of Gary. He's very important at this company. So, okay. So this guy comes to me, the new owner, says, Randall says that you're real important and I should take care of you. I says, well, I don't really need cash money, but I got an old car and it's real old and it's 20 years old and I really could use a new car because I knew he leased cars. He says, well, we'll lease you a car. That's not like a good deal. About $300 a month or something. So I asked him for a Corvette and he said, no. I said, well, how about an IROC Camaro? He said, no. I said, how about a regular Camaro? He says, okay. So he leased me a bright red RS Camaro, which was a 6-cylinder. So I'm driving around in this bright red Camaro. It's a big deal, and a year goes by, and Fender, Roger Cox, Roger, puts out a headhunter for me, basically. And somebody else too. I don't know if he did that. He says he called the headhunter. Says, "Oh, here, try this guy, Gary. We need you." Roger and Randall got along really well too. They knew each other and they got along well. So he put out this for this headhunter, and the headhunter calls me up. And I didn't know what was going on. Calls me up. I said, hi. He says, yeah, is this Gary? I said, yeah. Well, there's a company in Orange County that would like to hire you. We're a headhunter. They call it something else other than that. We're a company that does that. And apparently you would qualify. And I said, what do they do? He says, oh, well, they're in your field. They didn't want to tip the hand. I thought, well, there's only one. There's Fender and Rickenbacker. That's about it. And Randall. I said, no, I'd really rather not. By the way, tell Roger hi when you call him. She goes, well, how do you know? I said, it's a small world. And Roger, that's how that ended. But
that's funny.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about the early designs that you created for Randall? This, for example, that you brought in is a prototype.
Right.
Tell me about that.
That is RG80 112 SC. Now, the numbers on there, RG80 112 SC, mean Randall guitar, 80 watts, 12-inch speaker, switchable channels, or C for Celestion. So all those letters really kind of mean something, although we never published that. This amplifier here I did in 1979 was an old no holds barred single 12. Mesa Boogie was real popular at the time. All tube, Boogie was tubes. This is all solid state. But my attempt was here, and it turned out very successful, was to simulate the tube sound in a solid state amplifier. If you saw the schematic and held it up to, say, a Fender 410 basement or something like that, you'd see that for every tube that's in a 410 basement, I put a FET, field effect transistor, a discrete FET, not a chip or a bi-FET integrated circuit. There's only one integrated circuit in there, and that's for the reverb. So it's all discrete field effect transistors, and the power amplifier is a typical solid-state power amplifier, but I've modified it to simulate the damping factor of a tube amplifier. And like a Marshall, Fender, and Boogie, they all had the same. They all copied Fender. Marshall copied Fender, not only in the schematically, but in the looks too. You say, well, they got a big stack, and Fender has a 410 basement. But if you look at the top of a 410 basement and do that with it, and put some speakers, it looks like the head then of a Marshall. So anyway, there was Marshall and Boogie. Boogie used to buy Randy Smith at Mesa. He used to buy transformers from Fender in the 68, 90s. He was a service center in Redwood City or wherever his place was up there for Fender, and he'd phone up Fender and say, I need a dozen Showman transformers and a dozen power transformers and a dozen chokes and a dozen reverb transformers for twin reverb or Showman, either one. And they'd send them to him. And they looked at my account, and I bought one transformer in a year, just, maybe. So they got to look at this, and as a matter of fact, Roger called me. He says, you get any of those Mesa Boogies in there? I says, I've seen, I think, one. He says, next time you get one, look and see the transformer numbers on it, see if they're Schumacher transformers and have our part number on it. Well, I did, and they were. I said, holy cow. Then Roger found one. So they called Randy up, says, Randy, we can't be selling you transformers and you're making Mesa Boogie amplifiers out of them. He says, oh, I guess you're right, So then Randy went to Schumacher and says, these transformers you make for Fender? Yeah. Well, make me the same thing. This is in very early days. Make me the same thing and put a different part number on it. Okay. So Schumacher's transformers started with Leo back just after Leo was building more than 10, 12 amplifiers a month, because Leo was getting the triad transformers, which are on the shelf like you'd go to Radio Shack, buy a transformer. They weren't in Radio Shacks, but from a supply house like Don Randall had when he got out of the service. Anyway, so I decided to do this amplifier and just make a solid-state version of a tube amp. A lot of people have tried. I know Peavy, and all these guys, they've done different things, but they get wound up and tangled up in this design concept and not invented here, and they got to do it, and da da da. Goes on and on. Pretty soon it ends up a big solid-state amplifier with 1 million parts in it. Well, this one doesn't have 1 million parts. It just has, for every tube, there's one little field effect transistor. So in making the power amplifier sound like a tube amplifier, the output impedance should be fairly high, because the way Leo did it, there's very little feedback in his tube amplifiers, and the same for Marshall and Boogie, because they copied him. So there's very little feedback. As a matter of fact, there's current feedback in this one. So when the speaker impedance rises, the output of the amplifier, voltage-wise, goes up. And the speaker, looking back at the amplifier, speaker being a motor, it's coil and all that, is looking back at the amplifier at a fairly high impedance, around 30 ohms if it's calculated out. And that allows the speaker more flexibility and flexes and comb cry and all that type of tone that they get when they overdrive a Celestion or something else. And as opposed to most solid state amplifiers have very rigid output. If you put in 1 volt, the input will say, that's quite a bit, but and you get 10 volts out, you could put any load on that output from say 2 ohms to 16, and it'll give you 10 volts. That's it.
Wow.
That's, well, all the base designs are that way. PAs, all solid state amps that I can think of other than ours are that way. And that's actually the truest way for the truest reproduction, is what goes in, a very good representation of what comes out. Now this amp, being a constant current amplifier with a very low damping factor, it's kind of free to do it once and varying impedances, and it does. And so the guys played it. And matter of fact, this amplifier, this very one, there was an endorsee of ours that was playing our bass amps, and he brought his guitar player in one day, and he says, hey, I want you to play this amp that Gary's come up with here. And so what I did is I cut the pins off of vacuum tubes, and I stuck them in the back and put some silicone glue and glued them on the glue's still there, you can feel it's still there. Glued them on there. And I had it kind of turned around the lab, and the lab's usually got stuff everywhere, and the guy walks in with his guitar. And I said, you ought to play this thing. And his bass player, yeah, play this thing. It's really neat. So he goes up and he turns on and he starts playing it and he's playing it. I said, yeah, that's really neat. Now he saw the tubes in the back because I kind of made him see them, but I didn't talk about it. He plays it and plays, oh yeah, that's really great. And they take off. A few days later, there's a music store in Long Beach calls me up. Maury's Music, I don't know, you may know him. He calls me up, we knew each other, and he says, hey, you never told me about this tube amp you have. I says, well, we don't have a tube amp. And this is times later, I forgot all about that thing, what went on with that player. I said, no, we don't have a tube amp. Oh yeah, you do, because one of my customers was in your lab, Gary, and he played it. I said, oh shit, oh yeah, okay. Well, then I told him the story. So then it got back to that player that I tricked him. Well, he wouldn't speak to me for a year. So then he says, because he only likes tube amps. So I said, well, if you only like tube amps, do you like Fender twin reverbs? Yeah, they're okay. Do you like Ampeg? V4, I think, is all tube amp. Yeah, they're okay. You like Music Man? Yeah, they're okay. You like Marshall? Oh yeah, I really like Marshalls. I said, no, it's not tube amps you like Marshall. Because you told me the others were okay, but you really like the Marshall. Or the other guys like the other ones. Some other people like the other ones. So that even upset him even more because I tricked him. But that was the mainstay from about 79 on, along with all the other things in the catalogs. This grew into a head. The head was, just imagine 4 inches of grill cloth, and it was cut off. But then some of the people and artists, that says, yeah, it sounds great, but it doesn't look right. I mean, it looked like a Fender, kind of. Why don't you make it look like a Marshall? Gary said, no, we don't want to copy Marshall. It does what it does, and it's fine. Yeah, it's fine, but it's got to look the part. And that's what Marshall had that. If you don't have the big M behind you, you're just not rock and roll, And I heard that from a lot of players. Like Cheap Trick. What's his name? Rick. Rick's dad and Cheap Trick has a music store, and they handle Randall. And I saw Rick at a trade show, and I said, Rick, you playing a Randall? He says, yeah, I play it all the time in the studio. That's what we use. I says, but when you're on stage, I never see it. He says, oh, yeah, our trucks are full of Marshall, and we just leave them alone. And I said, why don't you put the Randalls in the trucks and leave them alone? Oh, nah, it's kind of like the Marshall, you know. I said, "Well, you're using the Randalls in the studio?" "Yeah, they're great," you know. It goes on and on. So that having that image was real important to a lot of these folks. So then I came out with a head that looked like a Marshall head, with the same circuit as that. You flip it over, and you put it down there like a Marshall. And we sold zillions of those. And there's kind of a cult that started with this amplifier, the single 12, and the Marshall-looking head. It's not a big cult, you know. We're not like Fender, but it's a certain amount of people. I don't know who they are or where. I know some of them because they know me now because of designing the thing. You get on eBay, and just last week I was looking on eBay, and there's a couple of Randalls on there. Gary Sunda, blah, 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 and about this and that, and Pantera and Gary and all this stuff. And a lot of them know that, so they'll write that in there. So a lot of them, when they sell this amp, or they put in, they're selling the head equivalent, we'll put in there for description, if you found this, you already know about it. So you already know what it is, so we're not going to bore you to death with more of the same. But Don Randall was kind of against this in the beginning. We already had a single 12 amplifier on the market. It was 60 watts, and it was kind of, yeah, it was okay. But it didn't have all this in it. And one of our salesmen said, he's from up Northern California. He's very boogie-eyed up there, you know. He said, "Gotta come out with something that competes with a Mesa Boogie." I said, "Well, okay. We're not gonna do tubes." He said, "Okay, whatever it is." So from the input jack to the speaker, there was nothing compromised as far as trying to get that sound. As far as using the FETs, the constant current power amplifier, the look of it, all that. And in the end result, the sound. So when it came out, Don Randall, it has a very sturdy chassis. It's not a flimsy thing like you'd expect, or you see in some single 12 configurations today. They sell for $200 or something. This thing was around $500. So what they would do, the salesman would take this in, and there'd be a brand P next to it, single 12, 80 watts, knobs, for $100, $200 less than this one. So salesman come back to me, "Oh, Gary, it's everything's great, but it costs too much." I says, "Well, it's got in it what it's got in it." I said, "Next time you're in the store, compare ours sound-wise with whoever you're next to, our competitor. Listen to that. And when you see the customer plays it, and he'll pick which sound he likes the best, then he'll come up with the extra $100, $200 to buy it." Oh, I guess. But some of our best stores were our stacks sitting right next to a Marshall stack. That's the best test. Rather than go to some store and play ours and run down the street somewhere and find a Marshall and play that one, you know. Just right in the same store, side by side. That was our best shot. Because ours were a little cheaper, because they're solid state and made here. And Marshall's very expensive. So, and side by side, the guys, if they didn't need that image, the Marshall image behind them, yeah, they say, "I'll take the Randall. That sounds great."
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah. And I always told them, I says, compare the sound. That's what we're selling. We're not going to get in there in a price war, because that guy in Meridian will beat you to death. And you know, he did. Great pricing. And that's where the new owner came along in 1988. He thought he should compete with Peavey with a little cheapy amp. I says, "You're not going to do it." You know, he builds so much stuff that on his littlest amp, he can take a loss and still beat you up. Of course he would. We can't take a loss on our stuff. Doesn't matter. We'll do it. Well, we built a little cheapy amp, and sure enough, it didn't succeed because we lost money on it. If we were trying to price it with the other guy, and if we raised the price, it wasn't what they wanted. They expect something more out of Randall than the cheap price.
In those early days, you also worked on the catalogs, is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about that.
Well, we had a guy named Mike who was a typesetter. Yeah, so yeah. Well, Randall did a lot of that too, Don Randall. He helped me put it together. I'd go to the photographer, take all the equipment over to the photographer would shoot it, and then I'd write up and paste, Xerox and paste stuff together and take it to the typesetter, and I said, this is what I want. And he'd make it look neat, you know. He'd take the V-locks and those negatives and 8x10 glossies and all this sort of stuff and make it look nice. Back when when you used a typesetter, you had a typesetting machine. Nowadays, plain old computer can do all your typesetting. But I didn't get my computer until 1985. But still, even after that, I didn't do any of the catalogs on that. We still used Mike for the catalogs. But when I first started there, we had a draftsman, and he left. And then I got another draftsman, and he was Bill Bateman of the Blasters, the drummer for the Blasters. And he was a really likable guy. I still see him once in a while. Real likable guy, and he's a good draftsman and did all my drawings this big. In 1985, Bill Gilo was engineer over at Rinkus Hines, and he got a little Macintosh computer. So he calls me up, and he says, Gary, you got to come and see this thing. This is really the bee's knees. You got to have one. I said, what is this computer? Lay out your circuit boards. See, I was using tape and Mylar and X-Acto knives and little dots that went everywhere to lay out circuit boards. So I went over there, and Bill Gilo showed me the program for making circuit boards, really slick, very simple, so I could handle it. And also this drafting program, McDraft. You lay out your front panel, you circle, do it, anybody could do it. So I went in and I says to Don Randall, I says, Randall, you got to come and see this computer that Gilo's got over here. And he and Harold Hines knew each other from doing stuff. And at the time, Rinkus Hines was just a few blocks from us in Irvine. So Randall said, okay, I'll go over and look at it. Well, Bill Gilo had just cleaned up his lab. Everything was nice and neat and very orderly. And usually labs aren't like that. Mine wasn't, certainly. So I get Randall to go over there and look at the computer, and Bill goes through these motions of the panels and circuit boards. And so he demonstrated it, we went back, and I said, what do you think, Randall? Should we get one of those? He says, yeah, did you see Gilo's lab? It's all nice and clean. I said, it's never that way. He did, yeah, I know he must have cleaned it up because I didn't see it that way the other day. And he says, well, you clean up your lab and I'll think about it. So I got the guys in production and helping me and straightening it up and getting everything orderly and cleaning out this and making the lab look neat, because that's where all the prototypes ended up, and half made this and parts here and chassis here. And every time I thought I had it cleaned up, Randall come down and says, yeah, you're getting close. Oh, crap. So we went back and started cleaning, did it all up. And finally I said, okay, how's that look? Said, looks pretty good. Now I'll think about it. I said, oh, crap, I need one of those because we can get rid of the draftsman. He's costing you something. And that's when that little computer in 1985 was like $1,500. Wow. A Mac Plus.
That's right.
Yeah. And I don't know what he's paying Bill for being a draftsman, but you know, that could add up too. And he says, you can do what Bill does on that thing? I says, well, yeah, I have to draw it out anyway and hand it to him, and he makes it nice and neat, so, you know. He said, well, okay. So I got one. I got rid of the draftsman. And he says, "Oh crap, I got replaced by a Mac Draftsman." But Bill's a good-natured guy, and they're very successful.
Yeah.
So I had the computer. Now I could draw my panels and print it out, and went on from there. So one time he brings in this persimmon wood. It's really nobody uses woods anymore. And Randall's sanding that thing. He sanded it for 2 days. It really looked good. He says, "Okay, I want to clear coat it." I says, "Well, go ahead." He says, "Oh no, you do it." I said, "Well, yeah, but you did all the work on it. You sanded it for 2 days. You paint it. You can do that." "Oh no, no." He was actually afraid if he got a run in it, he'd blame himself. No, if I put a run in it, he could blame me. So, but anyway, he says, "Okay, I'll do it for you. That's no problem. But the fun part's spraying it, No, just do it." So we restored his persimmon wood, and he was real thrilled. And we used to do a lot of that in there. So I got real involved in messing with golf clubs. And I started looking up suppliers of shaft, True Temper, and some head makers and grip people and all that. And if you buy enough of this stuff, you can get a good price on it. I was buying shafts 100 a time and heads and all that. And I make quite a few sets, my friends and everything. I had one customer that he had some guy in San Diego make him a custom set of clubs. Now this guy, do you play golf at all? Mm-hmm. Oh, this guy had a great practice swing. He'd stand next to the ball, it all went to hell. I don't know, nice guy. He said, "Oh, it's the damn clubs." I says, "Well, you told me they're custom made for you by some guy down here." He said, "Yeah, but I don't think they're right. You make me a set." I said, "Okay." So I looked at him. He's average height, average build. I made him average club. and he took them out and he said, "Oh yeah, these are a lot better." And after a couple of times, "No, I don't know, Gary. It's just not doing right." I says, rather than buy more, he says, "I needed another set." I said, "Rather than buy more clubs from me, why don't you take the money and get some lessons?" He didn't speak to me for a while, but he got over it. But Neil is his name. But that was really funny.
That is funny.
So the different people in the community that knew me and golf and all that started buying clubs from me, and I built a lot of them. I went to the golf version of the NAMM shows, met suppliers. They're all eager to sell. True Temper, I buy the same shafts at Pingwood and all those guys.
Now, I was going to ask you, Gary, who came up with the idea of the orange?
Well, me.
That was your idea?
Yeah, well, it started out with wood grain.
Oh.
When I got there, it was a wood grain stick-on thing. And no, I'd say it was me and Randall. 3M had a book of colors and he wanted to stick with 3M because it's good quality stuff. And so the orange was kind of a little overbearing when we came out with it because we're not known for that, being gaudy. But the wood grain was really kind of old-fashioned. It kind of reminded me of old people. And I wasn't old at the time. I was only 30. Now the wood grain would probably go. And I thought, if we're looking at rock and roll, we're not looking at wood grain, If we're looking at maybe country or western, one or the other. Maybe wood grain, maybe jazz wood grain. So we looked through this, and I kept pointing at this orange. He says, "Okay." So we got some put on there. That really set it up. And then that went on for about 73, 4, up to 79. This was the first amp to come out with a gray trim on it. And so we came out with this gray, because that's a little more subdued than that orange. They call it the Halloween amp and all kinds of stuff. But since that happened, since the orange, JBL's color is that orangish red in their logo, and a couple others have done it. I'm sure they didn't do it because of us, but maybe they did. because it shows up somebody. Whoa, yeah, we'll do that. And we're not competing with JBL, so it doesn't really matter. We came out with, now that particular piece of gray on that amp, on that prototype, is not what we ended up with. We ended up with a little bit grayer, pebblier thing. I think, I don't know, I might have spray painted that or on a piece of orange or something. I forget what it is. But that's different because that's a prototype and it kind of has the look. But
What about the bass amp? Tell me a little
this bass, well, the bass amp is, you could almost say it's the opposite of a guitar amp in that it has a very rigid, constant voltage power amplifier. You don't want your speakers flapping in the breeze like they do when they play a lead guitar. And the preamps in this one and the equalizer is an old gyrator circuit, and the preamplifier is all chips. There's no field effect transistors in there. And the power amplifier, that particular one's 300 watts, is a old-fashioned linear with a very high damping factor. One of the crazy things we discovered early in the career, and I see it done more and more, even today, this is 30 years ago, maybe longer, that the solid-state amplifiers were so good that you could reproduce frequencies way below audible ranges in 20 and 10 cycles, even almost a DC. But if you take a bass guitar, we'll say a regular 4-string bass, the open E, the bassiest string on there is 41 cycles. Okay, so anything below 41 cycles is kind of a waste because you could take that amplifier, well, you could take a bass amplifier and take the string and wiggle it like this, and you can see the speaker go in and out like this. And that takes a gob of power to do that, even though you're not hearing anything particularly, you're seeing the speaker physically move. So we thought, well, gee, you know, when you play some of our bass amplifiers hard, they kind of broke up, but it wasn't a lack of power. It's kind of some subharmonics got involved in this below 40 cycles and just gobbled up all the power. The thing ran out of power. So I built a filter circuit, a 2-pole filter that just dropped everything like a hot rock below 40 cycles. And I put that little circuit on a switch. And I'd switch it in, play, switch it out, play. Damn, that's the key right there. Getting rid of all that power gobbling up frequencies that aren't part of the notes. So I got Don Randall come in the lab, and I says, listen to this. This will really knock you out. See the switch? It's putting in the little circuit on the board. I said, this switch is putting that circuit in and out of the amp, and I'd play. So I'm playing, and he'd switch it back and forth and back and forth. Yeah, that's really something. Sounds really clean and tight this way, and this way it's kind of, the speaker's going all nuts. I says, yeah, that's the filter circuit. That's taken out 40 cycles and below. He says, that's really weird. And I explained it to him, and he got it. He understood very quickly what was going on. So we put that little circuit in our amplifiers, in all of our bass amplifiers, whether it was a little one or a big one, and they just roared. I mean, they're amazing. And so we couldn't figure out what to call that circuit because we're real proud of it. It's 5 parts in a chip, you know. So I call it a bass roll filter. And Randall says, no, that's it's like filtering something. It's taking the bass out. They don't want to hear about that. Yeah, you're right. What does it really do? Well, not what it really does. It does it to the ear. It enhances the bass, actually. Makes the bass notes that you're actually playing better. Well, we'll call it a bass enhancement circuit. So in some of our literature, you'll see, now includes bass enhancement circuit. And that was a big improvement. And I see that done on some of the bass amplifiers today. Actually, I've seen some of our competitors go to the constant current power amp that we have in this one. And Roger Cox, when he went out and bought one of these, took it over to Fender, they're playing, yeah, that sounds pretty damn good. Oh, Gary did that. So anyway, you know how Roger is. So then Roger calls me up. He says, yeah, we like that amp. I said, oh, good. He says, but you know that drill you went through for the constant current power amp, the current feedback? I says, yeah. He says, you can do that with a filter. I says, you can? Oh, yeah, well, you just put the filter ahead of the power amp, and you can boost that little bass that it does and boost the treble like it does when you have a constant current power amp. I said, Roger, there's more to it than that. There's the damping factor, which is what the speaker sees. Your speaker is still going to be looking at a 0.1 ohm or whatever amplifier, and you don't get that speaker and its response to respond the same. Well, you can do it with a filter. I said, Roger, what it'd take to build a filter in there, I've used 5 parts for a filter, 5 parts to do the real deal. Oh, okay. Roger's great. He used to call Randall up a lot. Oh, every month or so, and they'd talk. And Randall come in the lab and says, that was Roger on the phone. Yeah, how's he doing? He's doing good. He wants your job, Gary. I says, oh, really? It's funny. But this guy here, it wasn't cheap, but it stood its ground. And even the articles, you can go to internet on, what's that music thing? Anyway, they do write-ups on amps and used ones. And there's quite a few on this one, and it's Big Brother, the head. The only difference between this and the head was another 20 watts, just a transformer. Everything else was the same. Yeah, the guys really liked it. But the endorsees we had were, do you know Bill Acton? Bill Acton works at Fender, and he's the head of the guild thing at Fender, basically.
Okay. Yeah, I think I have met
I'm sure you have. He's a real outgoing guy, even more verbose than me, and a good guy, and he really loves his acoustic guitars. But Bill worked with the entertainers more than I did. I'd get them they'd come in the factory, and then they became friends of mine, like the guys in Def Leppard and all those, a bunch of people, Jamie Glazer with John Luke Ponty, and just great, great people. And there isn't anybody on that list that I met that was a jerk. I mean, people think, rock and roll and hair and everything. They're guys. The guys with long hair is all they were. And very talented. The bulk of them were very talented. They could really play the guitar. I mean, they really could. They may play music that some people didn't like the hair band, like heavy metal and all that. But they were very talented guitar players. I didn't know too many drummers.
Maybe we can go over that list real quick.
Oh, yeah.
Just to, is it still in there?
Well,
Or did I take it out?
no,
there it
that's
is.
yours to keep.
Oh, thanks.
Actually, you can keep everything in here except for this one article.
So did you have any personal run-ins with any of these guys, like Sammy Hagar and?
Oh, Sammy's a great guy. He was so athletic and he still is. If they didn't invent wireless guitars, he would have to have a 100-foot cable on his guitar. He'd run up the scaffolding, and then Gary Peel was his guitar player for years. And Gary's just a great guy, great family man. Emailed Gary just the other day. He's back in Massachusetts. He's with Tom Schultz now, and they claim they're going to come out with another album. That's Boston. Tom Schultz is with Boston.
Right.
And they claim they're going to come out with another album. That he's done that a few times. It's usually years rather than months.
This is a pretty impressive list. You got some really amazing folks on here.
Yeah, we had others too. I just saw some pictures when I was going to find that stuff yesterday. Wes Montgomery.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Red Norvo, the Vibes player.
Oh, really?
He was a character. Oh, they're all characters. George Lynch. He used to live just a few miles from my house, but he was with Doc, and the first 2 albums were all done with Randall's, and he bought. We started out with one of these, and then he came in. He said, "I need more stacks. I got to buy some more." So few days before he came in, I took let's see if we got a picture of it here somewhere, or something that resembles it. Nope. The Marshall-looking head job,
Oh, yeah,
we
yeah.
called 100 ES, RG 100 ES. And I've seen on the internet people say, well, I never did figure out what ES means. Maybe it means extra sustain. Maybe it means extra sound. Maybe it means English style. Well, when I made up the number back in whatever it was, 80s, whatever, I put the ES on there, and it kind of meant English style. That's what I was thinking at the time. But other people come up with other things. Yeah, that's what it means
Sure,
too.
yeah, sounds good.
So he came out with that head, and then I took one of them, and around the front panel, there's an opening down here for the knobs, around the front panel I put some chrome screws to hold that panel in there, some chrome screws with cup washers, and they went around. It wasn't, 6 or 8 of them or something like that. And we were trying to make it look a little different, and I looked at it, So I was sitting over in a corner in the lab. So George Lynch comes in, he says, yeah, here, I got to buy 5 more of those things. Oh, yeah. He looks over, he sees, I want that. I says, no, we're not making them that way. That's one I tried. It doesn't, we don't take care for the way it looks. We can use regular black screws. And oh, no, I got to have chrome screws around there. I said, George, we make them without that. That was just a trial thing. We don't particularly care for it. I got to have them. So I went up to McFadden Hardware, bought some more screws, put them in 5 heads, and he was happy then. And George is actually a very nice guy. His temperament is typical musician, but actually he's a good guy. But that was, 1980 something. So like a year ago, I see one of these on eBay with the chrome screws around it. The guy's got it for sale. It's up in Northern California somewhere. So I emailed the guy. I said, you happen to have one of 5 amp heads that George Lynch owned at one time. George is endorsing Randall even today. But so you got one of his early amps. And the guy thanked me for, really cool. I probably made him another $100 on the amp or something, having George's amp. There's only 5 made that way. But yeah.
Now, did any of these artists help you with the design, or were they mostly just endorsing playing them?
Yeah. Well, if you look on some of the eBay listings and some of the remarks about the ES, the head, it said that George Lynch helped me design that. Mm. Actually, and not Tesla, but Dimebag Darrell, some of the things they say, oh yeah, he was in on the design and especially made for him. None of that happened. I mean, I designed it, then they played it. They liked it. James Burton is.
Sure.
He's a character too. Well, they're all characters, like I said. James Burton came over one time. This is about 70s, late 70s. He came over, and he knew Don Randall because he was with Rick Nelson, and he was with Elvis Presley, and Fender, and that thing. So he came over one day, and he played some of our stuff, and then we went to lunch. Just James and I. And he says, I think we can do something here. I think I'd like to have a signature model with, James Burton on there. I said, I'll talk to Randall about it. Yeah, we'll do whatever, I wasn't going to be nasty to him. But he's really a nice guy, and he's a great player, obviously. He's a little stingy, but you know him?
Not that well, no.
Okay, well, if you go buy him a beer, he probably won't buy you one back, if you know what I mean. Anyway, so, but he's a great guy. And so I went back, and James took off. And I went and told Randall, says, how to go to lunch with James Burton? I said, oh, fine. He wants us to come out with a signature amp with his signature on it. I don't think so. He said, here's what we got. You'd like that or no? He was very adamant about that, not having, quote, a signature model for James Burton. But James gave it a try anyway.
Yeah. I noticed Dolly Parton is on
Yeah.
this list, and you showed me a picture of
Yeah.
her. What was your connection with her?
Well, her band played Randall.
Oh, okay.
And we ran an ad in the magazine, and we printed some posters about this big. And I had a bunch of pictures of her from that photo shoot. The photo shoot was taken at NBC. I guess that would be in the late 70s. And she was on a show, and they said, come on over and take some pictures. And right next door was another show going on. Forget the name of it. Laugh-In, I think it was. And that was going on. Anyway, we're over here with Dolly, and she's just the nicest person. Oh, she's a great person. Just as sweet as she can be, and it didn't seem to be phony at all. You know, she's really nice. And she didn't know us from anybody. I mean, she knew we're Randall people, but what's that got to do with the price of beans, you know? But she was very gracious, and her band members were all nice guys. And they posed and did all that. And we put out a poster, and a couple months later, we got a call from her manager. And he says, you know, we see that you got a poster out on Dolly Parton, you know? Obviously, we didn't do it by devious means. Well, I'm her new manager, and she's going to require $30,000 if you want to continue the poster. I said, oh, no thanks. But it wasn't her doing that. It was her new manager, and he was trying to make her money, and that's his job. So, but she was a very nice gal, really neat, and yeah, that's when I ran into Ringo. I literally ran into him. He was over there on the show next door, and he was. They have their, well, maybe they're different now. But they had a theater here and had a fairly wide hallway, another theater here, and we're going like this, and he ran into me, I ran into him. Oh, sorry, mate. You know, and that was it.
Your encounter.
My encounter, right?
So take us up to date with Randall and what you're doing now.
Randall, the guy that bought it in '88 was friends with Rudy at Washburn. You know Rudy?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I forget his last name. So Rudy got all the inventory, physical things, you know, all the stuff out of my lab, all the inventory. But well, I left in 1990. They let me go because they couldn't afford me because I was making so much money. That was a funny thing. Then my lab partner, and I hired him, and he was great help to me. He helped me wire things and make things and stuff, and he was a very talented guy. So the new boss says, you know, we can't afford Kevin anymore. I says, well, without Kevin, we wouldn't be able to do what I do. I couldn't do what I do without Kevin. You expect me to do things, and Kevin's my helper. Kevin goes out, tests stuff. Kevin's in the back, when I say out, in the factory. He's helping them out there. He helps me. He got to have him. Okay. Well, this went on for a while. He says, well, we got to get rid of Kevin. We can't afford him anymore. I says, well, you really shouldn't do that. I mean, I kept sticking up for Kevin. So he leased me this red Camaro, like I was telling you, and it's a 3-year lease. So the 3 years are about up. I figure, well, it's about due, you know. So I tell him, I says, isn't the lease up on this Camaro pretty soon? He says, yeah, you're right, it is. It's up. I says, and he said to me, he says, well, we won't be able to lease you a car anymore. I said, oh, well, that changes things. I mean, I can buy a car. And that car was worth about $300 a month, plus they paid for the gas, which gas was $1 then, not what it is today. So he says, yeah, we won't be able to do that. I said, well, give me a raise of $300 or something, that'd cover it. I'll buy my own car. He says, no, I probably won't be doing that either. We're really in a jam. I mean, we're about broke. I says, oh, well, that's not good to hear. Then he says, well, as a matter of fact, this coming Friday's your last day. I said, oh, that changes things a lot.
What a strange way to tell you.
Yeah, and he happened to be in his office in Wisconsin when all that went down. And so I says, oh, so that's it, huh? So some towing company picked the car up in front of my house, and I was gone on Friday, that day. It was July in '90. So anyway, after that, he hung on for a little bit, and then it went totally out. And he was friends with this guy Rudy at Washburn. So he's telling Rudy, I guess this is the way the story goes, that he can't afford Randall anymore, and it's a great company, he ought to have it. So Rudy bought it or whatever happened there, I don't know if any money changed or what, but Rudy bought the American music name and the Randall amplifiers, and then that's when Fender bought Guild. And Bill Acton went with Guild to Fender, and I was booted out the door. So Rudy is shuffling through all the paperwork, and I had this file cabinet. It was this big big drawers where the prints were for all the amplifiers, and he saw my name on all of them. He says, this guy must be important, whoever he is. So he called me up. Rudy calls me up, says, I want you to fly back here, and we got to get this Randall thing kicked in the tail, and you design all this stuff, so you might as well do more. I said, fine. So I went back there, and Rudy's kind of a funny guy. I don't think we got along that well, but he had some people there that were very nice, that were going to be ahead of the Randall end of it. And I asked him point blank, I said, why did you buy Randall? He says, for the name. He said, when I bought Washburn guitar, he said that it was nothing, and I built it up to what it is today. And I guess he did. It's a good guitar. So he said, so all the stuff he got, inventory, bits and pieces and parts, the Randall company, before he bought it, built everything out they could. They used chassis and transformers and knobs from this to parts to that, and had some really weird things come out, and they called it something, and the way they went. And they just built out as much as they could. And when I was back there, which was about 2 years after I'd left Randall, I saw all these parts. I saw my big drawer full of prints. I saw my file cabinet, all my folders in it, all the different products. It was like being in my lab again. And he says, yeah, so we want to do the RG80, because that was a big deal. I said, that's fine. So I redesigned that for him in a little more modern packaging. If you look at this one, inside, well, like I said, the wiring is all wacky, but if you looked at a real nice neat one the girls did, there's newer technology now and the way things are built that makes it a lot easier. As a matter of fact, the other one, the one I designed for them, looked just like this from the outside, but there's no hand wiring. There's a lot of hand wiring in this one. There is a circuit board, but a lot of hand wiring. And the new one had no hand wiring. Had a circuit board on the front panel, circuit board here, and a circuit board on the back for the jacks, and they all connected together. There's only one solder joint in the whole thing.
Wow.
And that's the line cord that came in, you solder the ground to a ground lug, the secure UL type soldering job. Anyway, so I did that for them, and they came out with that, and I charged them, and they thought I charged them too much, I guess, because they told me that I wouldn't be doing any more for them because I charged a lot, and they got a kid down the street that can do it. I said, okay. So then Fender called me. I did a project for Fender, the amp can. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
Yeah.
I've seen those things all over the world. Not a lot of them, but I see them. I was in Canada one time. There was a street musician playing one. I was in England, the street musician playing and stuff like that. Roger got me that deal with Fender. He called me up one day and says, want to do a project for Fender? I said, sure. So he had this amplifier in literally a paint can. He says, this is what we want. It's, yeah, you want that? Well, we want it, manufactured item, we want it laid out. Some guy built one in a can. Some guy built a little amplifier in a can. He got a royalty on it, I guess. I never met the guy. I never looked at his circuit even. but that's what they wanted. So I designed them that, and I guess it's still in the line. I don't know. And then 3 or 4 years ago, then I started working with 2 other companies. Also, Orange County Speakers, the company I own, along with my wife and my 2 sons. We got that kicked in the tail. It's doing very well when I left Randall. And also a company, electronic manufacturing company in Las Vegas that makes label rewinders. It's a very niche company, but he does very well with it. And I designed circuit boards and circuits for him. And also a guy that was out in Orange County 7 years ago who started making. Well, he knew me from Randall because he was the Schumacher transformer rep. Schumacher is very heavy into drag racing now, as you know, with his son Tony. AA dragster, full on, can't get any bigger than this one, dragster. Anyway, so Schumacher's rep, Dave Sarwald, decides he's going to make power supplies for G-scale model railroads, which is a bigger scale. They're about this big, and G-scale stands for garden railroad. You put them in your garden, they run around. So he's making the power supplies for that. So I designed the circuits and circuit boards for him. And on the thing, then Dean Guitars, about 3 or 4 years ago, because of Dimebag Darrell. Dimebag was playing our amps, and then he got killed in 06 or somewhere around there on stage. The guy jumped up on stage, shot him. But anyway, and he was a big endorsee of ours with Pantera, and also Dean Guitars. So Dean Elliott, that owns Dean Guitars, he got with a family, Dimebag's family and wife, and said, we'd like to have an amplifier and name it after him. And they said, fine, the royalties go to her. And they agreed on that. So they found a schematic of this, or of the head that he used. There was nothing special in his either. They're just stock. And so they got a schematic, which isn't that hard. And they bought one off eBay, I guess, bought one. And they shipped the schematic to an electronic company in China. Said, copy it. And took some pictures of what they had, and it's supposed to look like this, but didn't copy it. So they did, they copied it, and then it didn't work very well. So that's when they found me. They phoned me up and they told me what they did. Well, we thought we could do it without you, but I guess we need you. So we're going to send you what they built and see what you can do with it. And they got it pretty doggone close. But they had the power amp goofed around to a point that it was 1/10 the volume of what this one would be. I'm not sure what they did. I just tore it apart and put in the right stuff. I didn't even trace out what they had done. And but the preamp was dead right on the money. These effects and every resistor and every capacitor was right on the money. So I put it back together for them and sent it back. I said, is that what you want? He went, damn, yeah, that's it. So yeah, so I helped him with that. Then I did another little amp, a little 15-watt amp for him, and I did another 40-watt amp, which was supposed to be out this show, but they didn't bring it for some reason. I talked to Elliot a little bit. He said, oh yeah, well, business. Do you know Elliot at Randall?
Oh, yeah. Rubenstein?
Rubinson.
Rubinson, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Yeah, good guy, a little scattered, but a great guy. Yeah, real nice guy. Oh yeah, Gary, how you doing? It's real nice, all the time. Yeah, we're going to get together. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And he'll email me every once in a while out of the blue. Can you build a 300-watt bass amplifier? Yeah. So I said, yes. Tell me what you want, how you want it done. Oh, okay. Months go by. What was the last one he did? Oh, can we put that guitar head in a rack mount? Yeah, we can do it. What do you want? You want me to start? Never heard from him again. He comes up with these ideas. He emails me. Oh, then he came up with one. The last one was, we need a 300-watt guitar amplifier with 3 channels. Love Elliott. I said, well, yeah, okay, but why? What's that going to do? You know, what do you really want it to do? Do you want it switched? Do you want this? Do you want that? Well, he's off on another project. You know, he's a character. So what they did, their company's called Armadillo.
Right.
And he has Dean, and he has dime amplifiers and drum thing or something. So what they did was they got, well, on the amp that was completed for them, they got the stack-looking thing that Dimebag played. And they got a couple of our endorsees, too, because they like the Randall. He had, the China company made the chassis and electronics. And then Eminence, Rob, you know Rob Galt.
Mm-hmm.
Rob and them have a factory over in China that they make cabinets, really nice cabinets. They do a great job. Cabinets, and they put their speakers in them over there in China where it's a little cheaper. So what they did, they got the chassis that I did, and I've been with Eminence, known those guys since 1968 when they first started. About a year after they started Eminence, and they're great people back there, just great people. I knew Bob, Rob's dad.
Mm.
He was a hands-on kind of guy. I'm not sure what his degrees were in, but he could do anything. He was chemistry, electronics, machines, machinery, anything. One day he was taking me through the factory. He's just an arms, shirt. We're walking around, and here's a guy up there doing something on this ladder. He walks over, he's holding the ladder so the guy doesn't fall off. And he gets up when he's doing something right in the middle of the tour, He's that kind of guy. He really cared about his employees.
Mm.
And he passed away a few years ago. And his son, Rob, is a graduate from Georgia Tech. And he took mainly business, and I guess some chemistry, some other stuff too, I guess. And Rob jumped in there, and his dad was still there, and took over and really done a great job. And they got a nice big factory and lots of happy people, but because they really cared about their employees down there, they really do. So Dean got hooked up with them. So there's a guy named Dan that used to work at Crate Amplifiers when Crate and Kornblum and all those guys were together. And Don Randall knew Kornblum pretty well too, because when Kornblum first started out in the amplifier business, he'd call Randall and ask him, "Where do I get the handles? Where do you buy your Tolex?" And Randall would tell him, "Yeah, we get it here, we get it there." But it's such a small business, small world, that they kind of knew each other, and no use calling each other names because you might be working for him next week, But so anyway, Dan used to be with Crate. Good engineer, good guy. I like talking to him because I learn from these guys. Like I told you earlier about Jack Sonnemeyer and all that. Dan's a good guy, and he's kind of overseeing the China deal, but from the States. He's scheduling the factory and doing this, doing that over in China. So we have a pretty good connection because Dean Guitars, they're building the Dean cabinets, and the electronic company's building the chassis. So we talk to each other quite often because we don't know what the heck Elliott's doing. Did you get an email from Elliott, Dan? No? Well, I did. I'll send it to you. So I said, yeah, that sounds like one of his requests. I said, what are you going to do, Gary? He says, I don't know. 3 channels, 300-watt guitar amp? What are you going to do? I can do it. But anyway, so Elliott's quite a character.
So that's where we're at now.
Yeah, kind of. I'm still doing stuff for Bridgeworks, which is the G-scale model railroad, and Dean, and who else? Go to lunch with Roger once in a while. He's a character.
He is. Well, this is great. Gary, thank you so much for taking some time and sharing
Well,
your stories.
did I tell you
with
enough
us.
about Randall, the company?
Yeah, I think so. Is there any other parts that you
Well,
feel we should
other
cover?
than he's the greatest boss you'd ever want to work for. And even after I left Randall, after he sold Randall in '88, like I said, and I left in '90, even after that, we stayed very close, as you know, and with Wallace. And he's got two sons. Well, you know, you've been the two sons and a daughter, and Tim and I still communicate. And Tim's involved with the museum out, you know, Debbie, out in Corona. Yeah. On Main Street, Kids Rock Free, that museum.
Right.
Also, you know, Richard Smith, he's got the museum in Fullerton he works for and does. They got some of your films that they run in that museum, I think. I think
Yeah.
it's from you guys.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, I could tell you some Peavy stories. Turn that camera off. No, he's overall a good guy. We had a kind of a falling out years ago, probably '77. He came out with an ad in I'll say Guitar Player magazine. Tom Wheeler, you know, was back in guitar. You know Tom, great guy. I like Tom a lot. Very, very good guy. Anyway, so Pete Hartley comes out with this ad, and he's holding the guitar like this, and he's looking right in the camera. He says, "I worked 22 years for this here guitar. It's great." So in one of the photo sessions I was at for Randall, we'd start with a little amplifier and it got bigger, you know, as each shot was taken. It's all day deal. We didn't do a photo shoot. So at the end, we had that big old stack sitting there, and so the photographer says, "Go stand by the amp, Gary, take your picture." I said, "Oh, let's stand by the amp." Took my picture. So that was the last picture on the bottom of the stack when Don Randall was to look at them after we got them all printed and everything. So he's looking at them, you know, black and whites of guitar amplifiers. Black boxes with chrome corners on them. Yeah, here we go. They kept getting bigger. So the last picture was me standing there next to the stack. And he goes, and I'm sitting across his desk with him there, that same desk that you saw. And he looks at that, he looks at me, he looks at that, and he throws it over to me. He says, "We're going to do something with that." I said, "Well, like what? Put it on a dartboard?" "No, we're going to do something with that." So he thought about it, He came up with Gary Sunda, Vice President of Engineering, says, "I worked 22 months on this amplifier, and it's great." So that was it. And so I said, okay. So they ran that for a couple months in a Guitar Player and whatever else. And you know, it just went on. So at the show in Anaheim, whatever year that was, 77-ish, L.A. Krause, I'm walking around the show, L.A. Krause grabs me, he's ex-PV engineer, and then he went back to custom. He grabs me, says, "Gary, come here." I said, "What?" "Hey, L.A., how you doing?" Really nice guy, really bright guy. He says, "Boy, have you pissed off Hartley?" I says, "What? I haven't even seen him." I was thinking about the show, you know. I haven't even seen him. He says, "Oh, man, he didn't sleep for 3 days." I said, "What? What are you talking about?" He says, "Well, that ad you guys ran." I says, "What ad?" "Well, when you stand by your amp." I says, Yeah? That pissed him off?" He says, "Yeah. Oh, he's beside himself." He didn't speak to me for years, literally years. Jack would, you know, Jack is a good old guy. So anyway, this little feud went on. Not that we said anything to each other in particular, but for some reason it really upset him. I mean, and Roger saw it. Roger calls me after the show. He calls me on the phone and says, boy, you guys sure spent a lot of money in advertising trying to communicate with each other. Roger said that. I said, well, whatever. Anyway, so that's a lot of years ago, and a couple times I saw Jack and him in the bar at a show, and I'd go in there, I'd say, hi, Jack, and Harley turn around and see me and get all wound up. So a year or so ago, went up to talk to Hartley about Jack Sonnemeyer, and my son was with me, Brian, and so I saw Hartley standing there. I went up to him. I says, I told you a story earlier about Jack, and he says, yeah, you wouldn't know him. And we chatted a little bit about Randall, because Randall just passed away, and the conversation, we went, oh, he wanted me to hear his new amplifier. That's all I need is hear another amplifier. He said, oh, it's this big and it only weighs a pound and it's 6,000 watts or something, you know. I thought, oh, that's cool. So anyway, so we were walking away, and I guess, and my son says to me, he says, see, you and Hartley could get along. I said, yeah. But he's a very intense guy, and he's done well. But Don Randall was the best thing, because I did basically everything. I did catalogs. I did the advertise. I didn't do it, but we'd heads get together and we'd come up with stuff and go on photo shoots. And a lot of these artists, I was at the photo shoots and we took the pictures and stuff like that. And I designed the front panel to the back panel to the circuits to the circuit board. And of course, I run it by Randall. You know, say, yeah, what do you think of that? Yeah, looks good. Go do it. The PA systems, mixers, all that stuff. And what floored Roger and the guys at Fender was every show we'd have some new products out. And Roger, look at that, he says, how do you guys do that? It's only you, right, Gary? He says, well, yeah. Well, how do you do that? Because bigger the company, the longer it takes to get something done. You know, well, because I don't have anybody else in my way. I can just do it. You know, it's really simple. You draw the panel, you fold up a chassis, and you put a circuit in there. Yeah, right. You know, but now, you know, big corporations, that's what happened with Fender when CBS bought it. They got so corporate up their knees in paperwork that they could hardly build the amplifier anymore. And all those stories you heard about, they build them cheaper and all. There's some, but there's some engineers at Fender at the time that wanted to change what already worked, but I don't know why they did that. When they interviewed me once, Fender did, oh, that's, when I had the red Camaro, they said, why don't you come on over here someday, Gary? We'd like to talk to you. I said, how about Friday? That's when Randall was on a 4-day work week, and we had Friday off. They said, okay, yeah, fine. So I pulled up in my red Camaro in front, and it happened to be right, the big window was there, happened to be Roger's office. I pulled up in front. I didn't know at the time. I walk in, I'm here to see Mark Wentling. You know Mark, don't you? Yeah. Mark and Roger. Okay, they come out. And I could see Mark's always been friendly and everything, and a good guy, and we have fun because he's an engineering type. So he's looking out the window, and he gets this look on his face. It's a pretty fancy car. He says, yeah, they leased Randall leased that for me. And he went, he's turned flush because they don't lease the engineers' cars here at Fender, you know. I said, well, so that really got him started. So they well, we'd like to have you. And then I met Schultz, and he got a little peeved at me because then after they showed me around, and the plant was nothing at the time. This is '88. They just bought the thing in '85. Roger and Schultz and the gang. And they hadn't done much, and they had this big warehouse. I guess they're importing some stuff, or whatever. So they took me in a room kind of like this, smaller table. And Schultz is in there, and Mark and Roger and the guys. Bill Hughes, I think Bill Hughes was there. You know Bill Hughes? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now that guy, he's sharp. He knows a lot. He's a little different than the average bear, but I really like him, because he's very knowledgeable. I mean, I learned from him. Some people just go, Bill, He's a whack job. But no, he's very bright. But anyway, so he took me in there, and they're sitting around, they're talking about stuff, and then Schultz or somebody says, well, what do you think, Gary? You want to come to work here? I said, hey, this is really neat. I'm glad you invited me. But no, I'm pretty happy at Randall, and they treat me well, and I get to do what I do, and I couldn't be happier down at working at Randall. And they said, and Schultz looks up and says, well, what'd you come over here for? Like, yeah, we offered you a job and you didn't take it? What'd you come over here for? And he wasn't being real nasty, but, he kind of questioned it. And I don't blame him. I says, well, you invited me. Oh, yeah, okay. And Friday's my day off, so you invited me, I came over. I know, Mark and Roger, the guys. Oh, so you're not going to work for it now. So that was the second time it turned out. But we have fun with them. One day Roger called me up when Peavey came out with his Decca amp, which was a Class D switcher job.
Yeah, I know that.
I don't know how many he made, but he probably got them all back. I don't know that to be true, but it was a big old thing. A couple big transformers in it. It's supposed to be real efficient. Class D, and Class D is very efficient because it's a switch. It's on and off. It doesn't have any middle area where you dissipate a lot of heat. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so Roger calls me up and says, hey, Gary, you want to see a Decca amp all apart? We just got one. We took it apart. You want to come up and see it? Yeah. So I go and ask Randall. I says, Roger called. He wants me to come up and look at a PV Decca amp. I said, yeah, go. So I go up to the Fender. And they got it spread out all over the place. It's got more circuit boards lined up in it. I could build 20 amps, all the parts in this thing. It's supposed to be, now Class D amps, you can buy them fairly cheap and they're already made and they come in a little board and away you go. And I'm sure that's what Peavey's doing now, but back then, it's one of those things where you're advancing state of the art, and every time you come up with something, you got to do a little more and do a little more. Mm. Well, the thing was this big and stuffed full of circuit boards. Didn't have much heat sink. That's what you say, it was heat sink, right? Yeah. But it had a lot of circuit boards in it. And I says, well, how's it sound? Or how's it pan out on the scope and all that? He says, well, I don't know. We cooked it up and it blew up. I said, oh, well. Anyway, that was a funny story, going over to see that.
Yeah.
So, the Don Randall being with Fender all those years, there's still some tie there. Even when Fender was at its lowest, we'll say 1985, Don Randall still had a affection for it because of the name. He says, that company's hurting right now, but if somebody gets a hold of that thing, it'll be good again someday if somebody does it right.
He was right.
Yeah, he was right. He had when they sold Fender in '65, Leo wasn't feeling too hot, and Randall said, why don't we sell it, split the money? They did. So Randall was, CBS took him on as vice president of musical instruments. So he had to fly back to New York all the time. He did all that type of stuff, and Leo wasn't feeling too hot, so he changed doctors. The new doctor says, oh, you don't need that, you need this, whatever it was. Leo snapped out, he's fine, So Randall bought an airplane. Oh, he bought a twin-engine Aero Commander when he was at CBS, and then after a couple of years of that, he said, that's enough of that, I don't need this. So he left him, and he bought the twin-engine Aero Commander from CBS, and he kept it as his own. Mm. And that's what we used to fly to, the Chicago show. And he's a very good pilot, fully instrument rated. He really paid attention to that. But he would fly every year to Chicago, would fly from Orange County Airport to Albuquerque, get a big hamburger, fly from Albuquerque to Tulsa, Oklahoma. And there was some friends they had in Tulsa. We'd stay overnight there. From Tulsa, we'd fly into Chicago. So we're flying along, all this stuff. He says, Gary, what do you think about flying? You ever want to be a pilot? I says, well, yeah, I enjoy flying. I really do. It's great. but I wouldn't make a very good pilot because those two engines put me to sleep. He said, yeah, you can't be falling asleep if you're a pilot. So anyway, one time he used to put a hood on when he'd fly for 20 minutes or so to do his instruments, and he had to do that X amount of hours per year or whatever. So he'd go, hey, Gary, keep an eye out there. I can put the hood on and fly like that. Okay. So he'd be flying along. I'd fall asleep. He'd lift the hood up. Damn it, Gary, I told you to stay awake. What if something happened? I said, well, sorry, that's why I'm not a pilot. I fall asleep. And we'd eat candy on the airplane. He'd have a big bag of candy sitting here, and I'm over there. And we'd just eat candy like it was popcorn. It's just one of those things he did. He really enjoyed his candy in the airplane. And he really enjoyed his airplane. He had a Citabria also, which is a stunt plane. And every time I'd goof up, he'd threaten to take me up in the stunt plane and fly upside down. And
That'll wake you up.
yeah, I never did fly in that one, but he used to fly that, and as twin engine Aero Commander, he sold that in about 60s, I guess. It's getting long in the years a little bit, and he thought, well, I made it this far, might as well keep going without the airplane, so to speak. But he's just a great guy, and you couldn't ask for a better boss. And I didn't even realize it at the time, because I'd always been self-employed or worked for myself and had the companies and stuff like that, except for JPL. And looking back on it now, he put that whole thing in a 30-year-old's lap. And I thought I was a big shot, I guess, or something. It didn't bother me. I just designed this stuff and they'd come out with it, you know.
Worked out well.
Worked out well. I'd build one and then take it out to Virginia, and her crew, the gals, are wiring it. Say, here it is. I know it looks a little ugly, and I know you guys will make it neater. And they did, and they just built the next one just like it. And that's how it worked. A lot of stories. What time is it anyway?
Fantastic stuff. Well, this is great. How are we doing?
What is it, quarter to 1:30? Not too bad.
Yeah, this worked out really good. Gary, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Any other questions?
No, I think we covered everything I was hoping for. Yeah.
And more.
Fascinating.
Hey, got a
more.
storyteller.
No, it's good stuff. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome, Dan.
Yeah.